Real people, real breakthroughs. This is the Psychology of Eating podcast, where psychology and nutrition meet to uncover the true causes of our unwanted eating concerns. Your relationship with food will never be the same. Now, here's your host, eating psychology expert, and founder of the Institute for the Psychology of Eating, Marc David.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Marc David, founder of the Institute for the Psychology of Eating, and here we are in the Psychology of Eating podcast. I'm with Claire today. Welcome, Claire.
Thanks, Mark. So great to be here.
I know, and it's been a while. It's been about 8 months.
Yes.
And for those people who are tuning in for the first time, new to the podcast, or even if you're returning, this is a follow-up session that we're having with Claire. So we met once and did a little chat, and this is our time to just catch up and see how you're doing. So if you could share with people, what you had wanted to work on and how things have unfolded since then, that would be so great.
Yes, sure. I'll do my best to do that. So when we connected back in February, I brought up a little bit of my story and my relationship with my weight and body image. And I remember that what was my curiosity to understand was really how I felt like I've always felt overweight in my life. I've always felt like to be above what's normal. And so I think one of the curiosity that I was having is like, can I understand really, like, how can I allow my body to express what's the natural weight I can be in? How can I understand which levels or what I can work on to allow my body to express her shape or like the form that she wants to be at? So I remember I was talking a little bit about that. And what really was what was for me the take-home message from that moment from our conversation at that time was that your suggestion was to not focus so much on what I was eating or not eating. We had a conversation about my eating habits and maybe just having attention in terms of like cultivating slowness in eating and cultivating the quality. But your main suggestion was that probably for me the key would be to shift the focus away from controlling the weight and really allowing myself to find the expression of my qualities, so expression of like my creativity and my playfulness, and so really stay more connected to that part and less connected to how should I change my diet. Just really paying attention more to quality and slowness, and so that I think was where we were back then.
So how's it been working for you now? So what's happened? What's unfolded? Where you been?
It's been quite amazing. It's fascinating because it was certainly challenging to fully embrace the potential of completely I don't want to think, I'm not going to do another diet. I'm not going to choose, I'm not going to focus on what to eat too much, and really, really dive in what does it mean for me to find that expression of myself. And since then, there was almost like I don't know how you say it in English, but 180 degrees turn. I was in a job 8 months ago. That's been my job for the past 9 years or so. And I remember we talked in that session about how that was a little bit challenging for me. And since then, I had already started, cultivating new interests for myself, taking a certification as a yoga teacher and other jobs more in connection with people. But I hadn't really started much about that. I was holding those degrees and saying, oh yeah, maybe at some point I'm going to try to do something with that, but not feeling really confident about. And so somehow our conversation was kind of really a catalyst for me to really say, you know what, I'm really going to try to do that. And so I remember maybe a couple of weeks after talking to you, I started sending out CVs to yoga studios, and I started, doing a lot of different practical steps to to really try and dive in and see what it was. And things started to move. Things started to move, meaning I started to get responses from from studios, responses from organizations that I was trying to work with. And so from then, basically, so from February in the summer, I was able to give notice to my job that I was going to leave the job at the end of the year. And so shifted to part-time in the job, which for me was, I don't know how much I can convey of that, but for me it was huge. I mean, this has been, my first and only job since when I moved to the United States. So for me, it was really like quite a leap of faith going into a space where I don't know, exactly what's going to happen, but noticing that I start to have the resources to try do that. So there was that. And then more and more I was starting to, sometimes there would be thoughts of like, but maybe I want to control my food also, or something, just trying to go back a little bit to that mentality. And it was always a little bit of a dance of going back to really bring the attention to myself, to my growth, and that's where I am right now, right in the middle of that. So I still have a month or a month and a half of working in part-time in this job, and so many things are changing. Yeah. And part of me is still curious. I think it's interesting. My body has been very stable in these months. There hasn't been major, shifts or it's the shift has been my own way to relate to her, to me, to myself, and really feeling more and more in my power and connected to myself.
So when you say your body's been stable in this last bunch of months, are you talking about how much it weighs? Yes? Yeah. So you mentioned that you feel more in your power. That's interesting because, part of having the body we want is to feel more in our power. Here I am, and this is what I want now, and this is what I want it to look like.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how, you're feeling more in your power. Okay, so your body hasn't shifted in its weight. Yeah. But there's something liberating about that, to be able to feel more in our power without having to change our physiology necessarily and making it dependent on that. Like, that must feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's amazing for me to notice, because I think I was at this weight before starting, like maybe the last diet that I did, where I lost weight. And so if I think of myself back then before starting that diet, and I was basically probably the same way that I'm right now, and a completely different person.
Yes.
It's stunning for me to see. And also at the same time, sometimes going back, maybe looking at those pictures of when I was at the peak of the diet, and so when I had lost maybe, 20 pounds from where I am now, seeing myself clearly having a different shape there, I noticed the difference. But again, it's just not the same. I mean, it's been quite mind-blowing. Yeah.
Sometimes we change in shape or weight, but we don't necessarily change, I think, in character. Mm-hmm. And the outer change might not match any inner change. I even think of, I remember having some friends that I used to work out with, and all of a sudden they started putting on 20 or 30 pounds of muscle. Mm-hmm. And they look completely different. I probably didn't recognize them. But what I noticed was I had imagined they would feel more confident and more secure. And
Yeah.
they didn't lose any of their insecurities. They were still insecure about themselves, about life. They were still insecure about their body, and they were still insecure around women. And
Yeah.
they had thought that it would make a change. And I was stunned. And I realized, oh my goodness, how obvious is that?
Yeah.
Yes, there's an outer change. You can give a person steroids and make them grow muscle. And does that change anything? You could shrink your body. But what has shifted? So I guess I'm saying for me, I think the good news for you is that when there's a change that we really start from within, then that changes forever.
Yeah.
And it kind of, in my experience, it lays a foundation that if the body's going to shift, then the body can really shift in a sustainable way. Then weight could shift, health can shift, whatever the concern is.
Yeah.
So I think some of that is trust, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Trust. And yeah, and really the reconnecting over and over to the sense like unless it's the change is something that happens organically and because and naturally following change like inner changes, then I wouldn't want my body to change. I don't want to force he or her to change unless it's coming from a natural place, from shifts in my life. And I'm sure, I'm curious. I'm very curious in this of the space where I am right now because I know, for example, that I'm still in a very quite stressed out place with transitioning between jobs. I'm doing like crazy schedules right now, working 3 different jobs at a time. Having
Mm-hmm.
days where I start teaching at 7 in the morning, then I come to the office, then I teach again in the evening, and it's kind of non-stop.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that there's pretty much a lot of still of stress going on in the body, and I'm curious to see how that might shift as
Mm.
as things move, and especially once I move out of this job completely. So I am curious, but yes, I'm not. There's really way less of that obsession of if my body wants to stay this way, and for whatever reason, I kind of I think I'm at peace with that. I
Mm-hmm.
am. I think I can live with myself this way if that's me.
Yeah. I think that's a really good place to be. I
Mm,
really do, because sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes when it comes to weight, what I've noticed is that the lesson is really waiting, that we do have to wait.
yeah,
We have to just have patience. We have to let go. We have to put our attention elsewhere.
yeah,
There's just certain friendships or relationships that we might have. Sometimes we just have to let them go for a little while. We're not going to be around the person. We're not going to see them. It's just, and then trust that it'll cycle back at some point. And that sense of trust and that sense of what you just said, if nothing changes, I could be at peace with myself. That's a big healing. That by itself, to me, changes the body. It changes our nervous system, because that, to me, is called relaxation. It's called relaxation response. And that's, such the foundation for all kinds of good health indicators.
yeah. And anyway, it's been 8 months and of no dieting, and
Oh,
my
yeah.
body has been stable. Is already for me like a sign that, I mean, of something powerful happening because there hasn't been, gain, or there hasn't been a lot of ups and downs. It's been, it's stayed, and so yeah, so absolutely, it's a huge shift, and yeah, there are days. There certainly are like quote bad days where you're like, oh my God, really? I mean, do I? That's how I look, or maybe sometimes you see a picture taking a different way, and I'm like, oh, but there. Yeah, I think it's natural. I mean, there are moments. I mean, but and I more and more realize that it's not so much. It's really more about how I'm feeling in that moment, in how's my mood, how's my energy, that
Yeah.
then kind of reflects on how I'm seeing myself rather than the other way around. And so, yeah, I mean, very grateful for
Mm.
for this.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that you just said. We're never going to be there perfectly, whatever there means, meaning, okay, now I love myself all the time and I'm never critical about my body. Doesn't matter what it looks like. I'm still amazed at women, men who you and I might think, wow, they've got the perfect body, and they go through their ups and downs and their insecurities, and they want to change this and they want to change that. And it's okay to have those moments. There's always the moments where everything could be going great and you could be in a bad mood.
Yeah.
Um, so it's learning how to not give those moments so much energy and attention, and just let it be what it is. It's a moment and it passes.
Exactly. And staying with that and nurturing it, and instead of being even harder on yourself in those moments, going into a softer place of like, yeah, I'm gonna just, stay with that place. This is part of myself, which is tender and it's soft and it's still, wanting some care. So that's also a big shift, instead of, in those moments getting harder on myself and say, oh yes, now I'm gonna, do something about it. It's like, no, I'm gonna slow down. I'm gonna go get a massage. I'm gonna go, I'm gonna just go nurture myself and rest and take a rest of day, or a resting day, or it's a very different attitude than I'm gonna power through this, in
Right.
some.
So you're born and raised in Italy, yes?
Yes.
How do you think, and you've been in this country now for 10 years?
Yeah.
How do you think a European or Italian upbringing, does it impact your experience in any way of being in America, going through what you're going through? Are there any connections there for you, just having been raised in a different culture?
Mm. Well, what I perceive is certainly there is a connection, a lot of connection, with the sense of honoring the act of eating and the quality of food, and really having an experience of that's beyond just it's really nourishment around food. Food and is something that's celebrated in Italy, and that's part of really, yeah, as a very, it's a profound value, and it brings people together, it brings families together. We give attention to that and to the
Mm-hmm.
enjoyment and to the pleasure of it. So I think that plays a role into how I relate to that. And then beyond the culture per se, I think the what played a role for me was more the specific challenges in my family growing up, because of my family also dealing with weight issues, and I talked a bit about it in our previous podcast. So I think it's hard for me to disentangle that
Yeah.
from the culture part, because I don't. In my family, there was that issue of my mom dealing with some obesity issues, and sort of guilting herself for that, and being very hard and always on a diet mode. So there was this very subtle conflict of, on the one hand, the enjoyment of food and food having so many meanings, but on the other hand, like self-hatred and self-punishment, because
Yeah.
it's all about, you know so it's all your fault if you're not able to control that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of mixed messages there.
Hmm. I think maybe in part you're kind of transforming that in your system. You're taking what's in your lineage. Oftentimes we're completing some of the work of our parents that
Yeah.
they maybe are not able to do. And we so have to take away this thing called fault. It's your fault. When we operate from that place, it's hard to have success in anything. Well,
Yeah.
it's your fault you don't have enough money. It's your fault that you're, a woman or a man, or it's we can make up all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
And you used the word a lot at the beginning of our conversation. You're curious. You want to be curious, and I think when we look at things like a curious scientist instead of a blaming, judging person,
Yeah.
things open up more. Things become a little easier, faster. So I think you're on a great journey here.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm very grateful for that. And yes, I hope that I hope that can be inspiring to witness and inspiring to share. It's interesting. It's so my younger sister is getting married next year, and so as you might imagine, all family back there is switching into a diet mode because we fit into a dress and because so yeah, and it triggered things in me because I was noticing. So what if I don't then do a diet myself? Does it mean that I'm not gonna be included in that? And very interesting to learn holding space. To have people have their learning curve and trying to inspire them without forcing. And but yeah, interesting.
Yes. Well, I have a good feeling that the road is going to continue to be a good one for you. And I think patience is everything, really. It's going to be everything right now
Mm,
because we don't always understand what the body is doing and why.
yeah.
We don't. And we can have the most brilliant technology and the most brilliant science, and still people are ill, and still people are in the hospital, and still people die, and still, we feel pain. So there's something about understanding that there's a mystery to this, and part of it is respecting the mystery,
Yeah.
when it comes to our weight. As we could do all the right things and then the body doesn't shift, and we could do all the wrong things and it does, and then it comes back on again. So sometimes we just have to just let it be for a while. Just let it go. Do us, do our life, and do some of the work that wants to happen that has nothing to do with weight and
Mhm.
body, and empower ourselves. And that's what you've been doing. You've been making your life more of a match for what you want it to be, as opposed
Yeah.
to making my body more of a match of what I want it to be. So maybe then my life could be more of a match for what I want it to be. And you're doing first things first, and that's very beautiful. So I just congratulate you.
Thank you. And yes, I do totally resonate with what you're saying. It's like I was noticing how that would create like a vicious circle if I kept being fixated on changing the body first. I was continuously taking away attention from instead allowing the shift to happen from inside. And yeah, I'm just noticing that changing the direction of, as you mentioned before, is really a completely different way to go. So grateful to have seen that possibility, because it was really hard for me to let go and say, okay, for real, I'm going to give my attention first to to changing from the inside out. So yeah, I think it was important hearing it from you and from your experience and from that connection that we had. It was like, okay, let's try that for real for once. And yeah, and it was pretty amazing.
Well, Claire, congratulations again. I'm so happy for you, and I really appreciate your willingness to just share with people your journey and where you're at and how it's been, and it's certainly inspiring for me. So I really appreciate you just being willing to show yourself and be yourself, and I think lots more good things are going to happen for you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. I'm also really hoping that this can be inspiring for other people to hear, and I thanks so much for the opportunity to share.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, my friends, for tuning in. Once again, I'm Marc David on behalf of the Psychology of Eating podcast, and there will be lots more to come. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for listening to the Psychology of Eating podcast. To learn more about the breakthrough body of work we teach here at the Institute for the Psychology of Eating, please sign up for our free video series at ipe.tips. That's I for Institute, P for Psychology, E for Eating.tips, TIPS. You'll learn about the cutting-edge principles of dynamic eating psychology and mind-body nutrition that have helped millions of people forever transform their relationship with food, body, and health.